Most weapons of war are built for a moment. They're designed for a specific battle, a specific enemy, a specific decade. And when that moment passes, they're meant to vanish into museums and history books. But a rare few refuse to die. They were drawn up by engineers who never imagined their creations would still be firing decades, even a century later. They were declared obsolete, scheduled for retirement, and replaced by something newer and faster. And yet they endured. They outlasted the empires that built them, the generals who commanded them, and the experts who swore their time was over. These are 8 weapons that outlived every expectation, ranked from the merely stubborn to the truly immortal. Number 8. The Browning M2 machine gun. In 1918, as the First World War ground toward its end, an American designer named John Browning completed a heavy machine gun chambered for a massive .50 caliber round. It was meant to punch through the armored vehicles and aircraft beginning to appear on the battlefield. Few who watched it fire that year would have guessed they were looking at a weapon that would still be in frontline service more than 100 years later. The M2, affectionately nicknamed Ma Deuce, became one of the most enduring designs in military history. Its mechanism was so reliable, its power so well judged, that no replacement ever truly justified itself. It served in the Second World War mounted on tanks, ships, and aircraft. It fought in Korea, in Vietnam, in the deserts of Iraq, and the mountains of Afghanistan. Soldiers who used it in the 21st century were firing a weapon nearly identical to the one their great-grandfathers had carried. In an age where technology becomes obsolete in years, the M2 measured its career in generations. Number 7. The Colt 1911 pistol. When John Browning, yes, the same engineer, designed a semi-automatic pistol for the U.S. Army at the dawn of the 20th century, the cavalry still rode horses, and the airplane was a fragile novelty. Adopted in 1911, the pistol that took its name from that year was built around a heavy .45 caliber cartridge and a design philosophy of brutal simplicity. The 1911 served as the standard American sidearm through 2 world wars, Korea and Vietnam, over 7 decades of official service. But its story didn't end when the military finally began replacing it in the 1980s. The design proved so beloved by shooters that it never actually disappeared. Special forces units continued to carry variants of it. Civilian manufacturers still produce it today, more than a century after its creation. Few weapons have been so thoroughly declared finished, only to keep going decade after decade. The 1911 didn't just survive. It became a template that countless other pistols would imitate. Number 6. The Lee Enfield rifle. At the close of the 19th century, the British Army adopted a bolt-action rifle that would come to define its infantry for the next half-century. The Lee Enfield was prized for one quality above all others: speed. A trained British soldier could work its smooth bolt action and fire so rapidly that advancing enemies sometimes believed they were facing machine guns. The rifle earned its reputation in the trenches of the First World War, where British regulars unleashed a withering volume of fire. It soldiered on through the Second World War, served across the vast reach of the British Empire, and refused to retire even as automatic rifles took over the world's armies. Remarkably, the Lee Enfield remained in active use with police and military forces in parts of Asia and the Middle East well into the 21st century. More than a century after its introduction, soldiers and guards still trusted its bolt-action reliability, a weapon from the age of empire still standing watch in the modern world. Number 5. The Katyusha rocket launcher. When the Soviet Union unleashed its Katyusha rocket launchers against German forces in 1941, the effect was as much psychological as physical. The weapon was crude by the standards of precision artillery. A rack of rockets mounted on a truck, capable of saturating an area with fire in seconds. German soldiers came to dread the screaming howl of its rockets, and Soviet troops sang its praises, naming it after a popular wartime song. What made the Katyusha extraordinary was not its accuracy, but its simplicity. It was cheap, mobile, and devastating against massed targets. That formula proved timeless. The basic concept, truck-mounted multiple rocket launchers raining down area fire, never went out of style. Descendants and direct copies of the Katyusha appeared in conflicts across the globe for decades afterward. From the Cold War to modern regional wars, the screaming volley of salvo rockets remained a feature of the battlefield, a direct echo of a weapon born in the desperate fighting of 1941. Number 4. The B-52 Stratofortress. In the early 1950s, American engineers designed a long-range bomber to carry nuclear weapons deep into enemy territory. The B-52 first flew in 1952, in an era when jet aviation was still young, and the men who built it expected a service life of perhaps a decade or two. Instead, they created an aircraft that would still be flying combat missions in the 2020s and is projected to remain in service into the 2050s, potentially making it a century-old design still on active duty. The B-52's secret was its sheer adaptability. Its enormous size and range meant it could be upgraded again and again. New engines, new electronics, new weapons, without ever needing to be replaced. It dropped bombs over Vietnam, launched cruise missiles in the Gulf War, and provided air support over Afghanistan. Pilots flew aircraft older than their own fathers. In a field where machines are typically obsolete within a generation, the B-52 became the rare exception. A Cold War bomber that simply refused to become history. Number 3. The MG-42 and its descendants. In the middle of the Second World War, German engineers produced a machine gun of terrifying efficiency. The MG-42 fired so fast that its sound was less a series of shots than a continuous tearing roar, earning it grim nicknames from the Allied soldiers who faced it. It was rugged, cheap to produce, and brutally effective, and it became one of the most feared infantry weapons of the war. But the MG-42's true legacy came after Germany's defeat. Its design was so sound that it didn't disappear with the regime that built it. Reworked and rechambered for NATO ammunition, it was reborn as the MG-3 and continued to serve in the German military and dozens of other nations for decades. Its influence shaped machine gun design across the world, and direct descendants of that wartime weapon were still being manufactured and fielded in the 21st century. A weapon forged in the darkest years of the 20th century became a template that outlived the war, the nation, and the century itself. Number 2. The Kalashnikov, the AK-47. In 1947, a wounded Soviet tank commander named Mikhail Kalashnikov finalized the design of a rifle built around a single principle. It had to work no matter what. It didn't need to be elegant or precise. It needed to fire in mud, in sand, in snow, after being neglected and abused. And it did. The AK-47 and its countless variants went on to become the most widely produced firearm in human history, with an estimated 100 million examples manufactured. No weapon has spread further or lasted longer in the hands of more fighters. The Kalashnikov armed national armies, revolutionaries, insurgents, and guerrillas on every inhabited continent. It appeared on flags and coats of arms. Decades after its creation, it remained the defining weapon of conflicts around the world, still as deadly and dependable as the day it was introduced. Kalashnikov designed a rifle for the Soviet soldier of 1947, and without intending to, armed much of the planet for the rest of the century and beyond. Few inventions of any kind have so completely outlived the expectations of their creator. Number 1. The bayonet. For the final entry, we turn away from the machinery of the modern age to something far older, and yet astonishingly still in service. The bayonet, a blade affixed to the muzzle of a firearm, was born in the 17th century, in an age of muskets and pikes. By every reasonable measure, it should have vanished long ago. The rise of the machine gun, the rifle, and the precision of modern firepower should have made the idea of stabbing an enemy at arm's length utterly obsolete. And yet it endured. Through the trenches of the First World War, the battles of the Second, and into the conflicts of the 21st century, the bayonet refused to die. Modern soldiers still train with it. In rare and desperate moments, including bayonet charges carried out by British forces in Iraq and Afghanistan, it was still used in actual combat, centuries after its invention. The bayonet survived, not because it was sophisticated, but because it answered a need that technology never fully erased. The brutal certainty of a blade when all else fails. Of every weapon on this list, none has outlived expectation longer. A tool from the age of muskets, still fixed to the rifles of the modern world. That is endurance no engineer could have ever predicted. These 8 weapons share something that has nothing to do with firepower or technology. Each was built for a moment, and each refused to accept that its moment had ended. They outlasted the engineers who designed them, the soldiers who first carried them, and the experts who declared them finished. From a blade born in the age of muskets to a bomber built for the Cold War, they remind us that in war, as in history, the things we expect to fade away are sometimes the very things that endure the longest. The question is not always what comes next, but what simply refuses to leave.